Have you ever been stuck at the grocery store wondering what cheese you wanted? Well, this video is for you, because today we're testing cheap versus expensive cheeses. First, we're starting with a melt test. And after about 30 seconds, the cheap cheese melted more. Now for the taste test. To make sure we get an accurate test, I made sure to swap around the cheeses so he didn't know the positions. After testing both, here was the results.
Organic and non-organic.
Yeah, you got it!
Woo! Nice. And organic cheese wins.
We're testing cheap versus expensive rotary tools. As you can see, the expensive on the left seems to be doing a much better job.
An expensive one. Cheap versus expensive razors.
First for the shaving test. On the left side we have the cheap razor and on the right side we have the expensive razor. And as you can tell, the expensive razor did a much better job on my hairy back. Now to microscope the blades. First we have the cheap. Although the blade edges look similar, the expensive razor does a much better job.
An expensive one.
If you're looking for the best blender for your kitchen, look no further, because today we're testing cheap versus expensive blenders. Right off the bat, you can see the cheap blender has 4 blades while the expensive has 6. Now to see how well those blades really work. We grabbed an assortment of fruits to create the best fruit smoothie we could. Bananas, strawberries, apples, and more. We tossed in our ice and began blending. After about 20 seconds, it was time to check the consistency. Only going based off appearance, both blenders did a very good job. So finally, we had to move on to the taste test. So after trying both smoothies, here's what we came up with. The consistencies for both smoothies were the same, aside from one thing. The cheap blender wasn't able to blend the apples as well as the expensive.
An expensive one.
Have you ever felt judged for having wrinkled clothes? Well, it's time to change that. Because today, we're testing cheap versus expensive clothing irons. First, we're starting with the cheap. We went over each t-shirt twice with each iron. After the test, you can see that both shirts were pretty wrinkle-free. Next for the steam test. Both irons came with a steaming feature, so we wanted to see which one was more prominent. Although the cheap looked stronger, they both felt exactly the same. And finally for the temperature test. We stuck a thermometer into both clothing irons to see what the max temperature would be. For the cheap, it did seem to get to the max temperature faster, but the expensive did eventually reach it too. So in the end, due to the $30 price difference, it does make more sense to go with the cheap.
And it's a tie.
If you can't live without coffee, then this video's for you. Because today, we're testing cheap versus expensive coffee grinders. We put a third cup of coffee beans into each grinder and grinded them up for about 15 seconds. Then we checked which grinder was going to be able to produce finer coffee grains. First we checked the expensive, which did seem to have slightly larger grains than the cheap. Cheap definitely had finer grains. Now to test which grinder strains better coffee. And it seems like they both strain pretty equally. So after testing both, here's what we came up with. The cheap coffee grinder was able to grind up the coffee beans into much finer grains, which then leads us to the price comparison. For the expensive, you're going to be paying around $30. For the cheap, you're going to be looking at around $20. So it's almost a no-brainer to go with the cheaper option.
And cheap wins.
Have you ever been tired and looking for an energy drink? Well, look no further, because today we're testing energy drinks. First, we're doing a carbonation test. You can see that all 3 drinks are equally carbonated. Now for the flavor test. The first drink tasted a little sour and bitter with a hint of fruit. Out of 10, I would give this a 5. The second drink's flavor started off great and then started to turn a little bitter and like alcohol. I would give this a 7 out of 10. The last drink was definitely the tastiest. It had a very prominent fruit punch flavor, but definitely felt like there was a lot of sugar.
After trying all these energy drinks, my favorite one is definitely the Meltdown.
Not sponsored.